everybody, and welcome back to John's Workshop. And in this video we're going to be doing something completely different for John's Workshop, and we're going to be fixing and restoring a Grundig transistor radio. So why are we going to be doing that? Well, a couple of reasons. This is John's Workshop, would like a radio, nice looking radio for her craft room, and that's one reason. The second reason is anybody who knows me well, who's been following this channel for a long time, knows that I know as much about electronics as I do about knitting, and no, I'm not a closet knitter, before anybody suggests that. So this is an opportunity for me to start to try and get into a bit more of the electronics side of everything workshop related. Alright, it's a radio, but it's full of the same kind of components that a VFD would be full of, albeit slightly newer versions, that kind of thing. So I want to start understanding more about electronics, and I've been doing some studying, and I'm going to be using a couple of these kind of restoration videos going forward to improve my skills and learn a bit more about electronics. So that's another benefit of this. It says there race to the bottom and a red cross next to it. So why are we not just going out and buying some £6.99 bit of cheap, nasty, horrible plastic from the Far East that is a radio that we can have in the house? Well, because I just don't want to, and we've done it far too many times already, and I don't learn anything from that. That kind of gear isn't serviceable. If it goes wrong, you chuck it in landfill. Predominantly that's where most of it will end up. I want to do something different. Let's pick something that's got some vintage to it and that's been built to a much higher quality standard and is serviceable. So change of tack. So what have we bought? So it's a Grundig Melody Boy 500, that's the model number. It's German made, West German made. Its vintage is early 1970s. Now what else have we got in the workshop that's around that age? Don't answer that. And the eBay listing said working condition, however, with some sticky buttons, right? So I'm not going nuts with the electronics to start with. I thought I'd start off with something easy, but what we are going to do is, and bear in mind that's an eBay listing, you can't really trust anything that it says. I might get lucky, that may be exactly what it is, but similarly we could plug this in, switch it on and find out it doesn't work at all. So that's the risk you take with the roulette wheel of eBay. So I thought I'd start with something fairly simple to start with. So I've not unpacked it as much as I'm desperate to get in and have a look at it. I've left it exactly as the seller sold it to me, so this isn't one of these restoration videos where I've taken a perfectly serviceable product, put it out in the garden, wiped mud all over it, and then brushed it back off again and got hundreds of millions of views on a perfect restoration. This is a pucker restoration, and from the photographs I've seen of it, there is quite some years of grime and muck to get off it, as well as obviously fixing sticky buttons and things like that. So that's probably it for the opener. Exciting times, something a bit different, you know, from the usual machining type videos, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to stretching my knowledge, increasing my knowledge, starting to get into a little bit more of the electronics side, electronic engineering side a little bit more, and being a bit more comfortable then next time it comes around to taking a machine apart and wiring up switches and things like that. It's just all part of that learning curve for me, and hopefully at the end of this we will have a very nice product we can put in the house that will service us for many years to come. So without any more waffling, I will clear the bench, which will be a task all of its own, and we will bring you in as we do the unwrapping and see exactly what I've bought. Okay, so here we go. This is as it came. Having studied the eBay pictures quite well, I've decided I'm going to get a pair of these on. You may see why when we get into this. So it came reasonably well packaged from the seller. It's been here a few days and I've been itching to get into this. Okay, so this is what we've got. Now I don't know whether this is showing up on the camera or not, but there is quite a lot of age related grime, muck on this. Nothing too nasty, I don't think, but there's quite a lot of sort of ground in muck and dust here and there. So I don't think it's got a battery in it. It doesn't feel heavy enough. I've ordered a battery. This takes a big PP9. Is it a PP9 or it's a 9-volt battery in there? One of the big type ones. We've got some stickers on the front where somebody's obviously had stations preset at a time in the past. So this has got UHF or FM, shortwave, medium wave and long wave. So it's 4 bands and therefore it'll have different aerial configurations in it. It looks to be, you know, undamaged. That's why I bought this. There's no big lumps missing out of it. Yes, it's dirty, grubby, needs a clean, but oh, that's nice. The aerial has got detents on it for different angles. And this is the difference between something that's been built to a standard rather than to a price. So what I'm going to do now is get some tools together, and the first thing we're going to do is take it all apart. So I'll bring you back when we're doing that. Okay, let's make a start on tearing this down. And if I needed tear down instructions, there they are in the bottom of the battery tray. How useful. I'll study those in a minute to make sure I'm taking the unit apart in the right order. Oh, and look at this. I thought this was battery only. It's not. It's got also a 240 volt input. So I can actually kill myself doing this, which is probably highly likely. The battery terminals look good. No corrosion. I think this will come off like that. So we've got quite a bit of corrosion on the inside of these handles. That one's probably even worse. And some small amounts on the outside, so we'll have to see how well this cleans up. I've got myself an old cracker tray that I'm going to be using for just dropping the screws into as we take this apart. So I'm just going to switch the camera off, study the instructions, and I'll bring you back. So that's got our chassis removed from the casing. That's going to make cleaning much easier. So we'll put the case to the back for now, and we'll continue on. Well, that's interesting, that won't come out either way. Well, not yet anyway. I'm sure we'll find a way to make that come out in a bit. Okay, we're just going to remove this speaker so that I don't damage it. So I've got my soldering iron, we've just tinned it up with some nice leaded solder, courtesy of Dave Ticehurst in Australia. Thank you, Dave. This will be leaded solder on here, I would have thought. Is this soldering iron going to be man enough? There we go. So that's got the speaker out of the way, just so that we don't damage that. What I've done is I marked up the speaker with the colours of the wires, so that when we come to reassemble it we get the right one to the right connector. So the next job now, I want to take this top piece off here. Now, I'm not sure how that comes off, because this has got the tuning. This has got the tuning movement, which is making some interesting noises. It's really interesting what they've done here. So the tuning lever's controlled by this string across the top, the actual indicator, if you want to call it that. It's kept in place down here by two strands of what look like fishing wire, fishing line, nylon line, that just hold the bottom of that pointer in place so that it doesn't flap around. Really quite clever what they've done there. So I'm just going to have a look at the way this piece comes off, and we'll see if we can get this off the unit, and that will give me access to the rest of the workings. We've got this issue with one of the switches. I did test it. It's the second one in this one, where I've pressed it quite a few times now, and it is working more times than not, but there was a couple of times I've pressed it and it was kind of just sticking down. I think just with using it a few times it's freed itself up. But I want to clean all of these switches out, so I want to get into here. Okay, so we're just going to try and remove this aerial. I've taken the screw out of here, and this bracket is soldered onto the board, which is obviously the connection. I'm taking it the ground connection of the aerial. There we go. That's just going to make cleaning that much easier. Okay, so we've got some isopropanol alcohol. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of that in the end of our parts tray. And what I'm going to do now is basically use two acid brushes, a dry one and a wet one, and I'm just going to go all over the board with the dry one for a start and remove all the dust and fluff with dry, and then we'll be getting into with a bit of wet stuff where I think it needs it on various different bits, just to clean up probably into these switches here, and we'll give those a good clean, and any other bits that I think needs a good clean with a bit of alcohol. So we'll be doing that. I'm not going to film all of that, that's obviously quite boring, so I'll bring you back when we've been through and cleaned the worst off. I think there is some form of conformal coating, I think it's called, on the back of the board here, so I'm going to keep the isopropanol away from that, with the exception of the two areas I've hit with the soldering iron, because I think the isopropanol will be fetching all of that off, but I will clean up where we've had the solder, just to make sure that we're not leaving any flux or anything nasty on the board in those areas. So I'll bring you back in a bit once we've cleaned everything up, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to go over this with an eye loop, and I'm going to be looking for any dry joints, any dry solder joints, or anything that looks burnt or scorched in terms of the components on this side, and we'll be giving it a thorough inspection. Then we'll get the multimeter out and just check one or two things. There's an inline fuse at the power supply end here, so I'm just going to check one or two things that I've got knowledge to check, and then we'll be using some deoxit, which I've also got on the bench. So I've ordered some deoxit, which we'll be putting into some of the switches, especially the slider switch for the volume. We'll put a little bit on that and a bit into these switches if we can work some in. So I'll bring you back when we're doing some of that, once I've given this a thorough clean up and a thorough inspection. Okay, we've been all over this and cleaned it right up. Got all the buttons clean on the top, very nice, all that muck's come off. I've been right over the board with an eye loop, looking for anything that looks burnt or dry joints. Can't find anything, it all looks in very good condition. I then use my multimeter, check the fuse, check the continuity on the mains input wire all the way to the board, check continuity on the battery wire. I've checked one or two other bits, just what I can with the multimeter, nothing much more than I've told you really. I've checked the speaker, it should be a 6 ohm speaker, it's actually measuring 5 ohms. I'm guessing that's okay. So next job now, I've been all over that. I'm going to put this to one side and I'm going to actually start on the rest of the radio now. I'm not going to show that, well, I'll show bits of it, I'm not going to show all of it because it's just lots of cleaning. I did make a start on the aerial yesterday, so I've managed to clean up these bottom two sections, albeit that one's now all sticky again, so there must be some grease or oil in here. So I think before I do any more cleaning, I'm going to give this a really good flush through with IPA. We have got a slight bend in the aerial, which we will tweak. It's only in the top section, you can see that spinning eccentrically, we'll just tweak that by hand. So yeah, I'm just going to crack on. I'll show bits of me sorting this out, and then we're going to move on to the case and the handle. So we'll put this unit to one side, happy with that, and then we'll start the rebuild. So I'll bring you back at various stages as I'm cleaning the rest of the case up. So we've straightened our aerial out. It's going to be hard to get it all on camera, but you can see we've straightened all that out now with a bit of just manual tweaking. What we've also done is been down with alcohol in each of the sections with the IPA, just to clean it out and wipe it with a rag. And what we're doing now is section by section, we're just attacking the the surface finish, and I'm using my old favourite from my motorbiking days, Autosol, and one tube of this will last you a lifetime, and it's absolutely brilliant stuff for any type of metal, aluminium, stainless, chrome, really good. And it's just simply a case of the tiniest amount, and I mean the tiniest amount, on a rag, and then section by section we're just applying that, and you've got to rub it in really hard until it almost disappears. And it tends to go black. And clean bit of cloth. Let's give that a quick wipe over. And I don't know whether the camera's going to show this up, but you can see the difference between this section we've just done and the next section that we haven't, night and day. So I'll get the rest of that done off camera. Okay, we're just going to start on the bits of the casing now. So I'm using some Dettol antibacterial wipes. I don't want to use the IPA on this in case it starts to fetch any of the paint, the white off, which I don't think it will, but we'll start with something gentle, and if there's any real stubborn marks we'll have a go with something else, but this is pretty clean actually. A bit of discoloration on the top, but this seems to be fetching it straight off on the white. Well, that's a shame. I'd not spotted that on the eBay pictures, but it looks like somebody's decided to mark the stations by scratching marks into the top chrome bar here and a little bit into the plastic. Nothing I can do about that. That's just going to have to stay scratched as it is. If I try and do anything with that, even with metal polish, I'm just going to take the writing off, so that will just have to get cleaned and stay as it is, which is a bit of a pity. But anyway, we'll carry on. Okay, so we've probably passed the point of no return with this. I've got into something that I probably shouldn't have got into, and I don't know if the camera's going to show it up, but where these scratches are on the chrome here, these scratches were down onto the plastic in the same places. It's obviously where somebody's marked radio stations just by, you know, carefully scratching all of the top of the radio, which is what you would obviously do. So what we're doing is we've got some 1500 grit wet and dry. I can't do anything with the scratches on the chrome, but what I am doing is just carefully with the wet and dry on the plastic, flatting down, and when we've done with that, we've got some 2000 grit wet and dry, which we'll do the same with. Then we'll follow that on with some T-cut or plastic polish or something like that to hopefully he says, bring it back. So I will continue on like that. You don't need to watch me do any more of that. The front's not too bad. I'm not bothering with the front. I don't think. I'll just give that a T-cut. There's no real scratches on that, so we'll just T-cut that when we do this top bit. So I'll bring you back when we've either completely wrecked this or we've got it back to a state that looks as good, if not better, than before we started. Okay, I've done as much as I'm going to do on this, so we've now brought this back to as good as I'm going to bring it back to, and we've used teacup, and we've polished and polished and polished and polished, and I'm kind of chasing diminishing returns now with this. So there's a couple of little marks still that aren't going to come off that were there originally. I'm just going to live with those. There's a couple where the little stickers were, they'll not even show up on the camera, where the stickers were for the channel. That's just where all the plastic's been bleached right the way through, apart from where those stickers were. I'm never going to get rid of those. And note to self, next time I'm shopping for some bits and pieces, buy some finer grades of wet and dry, so that I'm not tea cutting from 2000 grit all the way up to a mirror finish, because that's taken far more polishing than it should have done. But anyway, we're done with that, and I spared you the anguish of watching me polishing. So what I did do in the meantime to break up the boredom and tedium of all that polishing was attack the handle. So we've got that in a nice state now. That's come up really nicely on both ends, and on the inside where all the corrosion was, we've cleaned it up. There's still obviously pitting where the corrosion was, but we've got rid of all the corrosion off that inside as much as we can, and the same at this end. So that's all nice. It's all come up nice on the ribs, so that's looking good. So all that's left now really is the casing itself, which is a nice easy bit. So we're going to get the gloves back on and start with this. It's really just dirt, muck, dust, cobwebs, and we're going to use some wipes to start with to get the worst off. We'll use the isopropanol on the brush where we need to, and we're just going to work our way through cleaning this up. Okay, so we're getting ready to refit the aerial now back into the unit. Before I do that, this has got two ball bearing detents in it, and I've just sharpened up the end of a bamboo cotton bud or Q-tip, and I've just got some SKF normal bearing grease here. I really could do with some silicone grease, but I don't have any. So this, for what we're doing, it's just a tiny amount. I'm just going to put a tiny bit on the ball that way, and then same thing this way, just the tiniest amount. I'm going to feed that into there. Wipe off any excess, and we'll call that done. So next job now is to get this positioned back in and soldered back into place onto the board. Okay, we're just going to put some deoxit on the switches that I can get to. So I'm going to put a tiny bit on this volume slider. So this was the sticky one when we started. It's working lovely now. So that deoxit will work its way in over time. Now there's one more switch, which is here, which is to switch between battery and mains. So the switch is on the back here, it pokes through the back of the casing of the unit, and the business end of that switch is inside here. There's a contact, so we're just going to put a little bit of deoxit on there as well. Okay, let's try and put this back on. The final job on this bit is to reinstall looks like that's all on correctly. Just check our tuning. Yep, all works nice, nothing catching, and the volume switch is engaged. And the buttons all work without sticking. So all that remains now is to get it back into the case. Got to put the top on the aerial, which I think I'm going to use a tiny bit of Loctite, because that just keeps unscrewing. It's quite a slack thread, so we'll just put a dab of Loctite, just the tiniest bit, on there. And then we just got to put it back into the case, put the chassis back in the case, and that's pretty much us done. So I'll bring you back when we're doing those last bits. Okay, time to get all of this back together. Let's see what we've got. So there we go, that's pretty much the job complete, I think. We've not tested this at all yet. Forgot this. So despite our scratches and muck that was on this when we got it, we've still got the scratches. Obviously there's nothing I can do about those, but that looks now very nice and tidy. Sticky button is no longer sticky, so the last job now is to replace the plug, and I'll bring you back when we're ready to switch this on and see if that was all worthwhile. Okay, so we've got everything back together. What I didn't show was me popping the battery box cover back on underneath. That's all done now, and what I've done was slightly shorten the cable, because where it had been under the cable clamp it looked a bit dodgy, so we just took a small amount off there and re-wired this in. It did have a 13 amp fuse in, which I think is far too much for a device of this size, so we've replaced that with a 3 amp fuse, and this is it. Let's get it plugged in, switched on, and see what happens. So we'll lift the aerial up. Get that out of the way, put that over there, and it makes some noise. So we're on FM, or UHF as it used to be called. We'll just start moving down. If I hit music I'm going to have to go straight over it because of copyright, unfortunately. Let's see if we can pick anything up.
Intelligence Security Committee in Parliament, which
wow,
again was pretty clear about what it believes China is doing. It says in terms of interference, China oversteps the boundary, crosses the line from exerting influence, a legitimate course of action, into interference.
What a sound.
Company as we spend Monday night together on Classic FM.
So
yeah, we've got stuff happening on FM.
The Prime Minister, we understand, told the Chinese Premier at the G20.
All sounds very good. Long wave.
The ages have made many mistakes, which later were regretted by the British people, including yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, not getting much more than that out of it. The United States,
medium wave.
They've had a say about what's happening.
Yeah, I'll say that, mate, because you know.
Lots of channels on medium wave, short wave.
On ne sait pas exactement à quelle minute l'autre match va débuter. C'est-à-dire qui débute, parce que
yeah, so lots going on. I will move this into the house, into its final resting place, which will give me the thumbnail shot that I need for this video. And it's a shame I can't play some music, but from what I'm hearing that sounds fantastic. So there we go, 51, 52 years old, and still going. So the race to the bottom is clearly won. Or lost, depending on how you want to look at it. I'm really pleased with that. We've probably saved that from landfill, and that's a very nice looking piece. So I'll bring you back in the house when we're in its final resting place. Here we go. Here's the final position. Excuse the handheld. And I think that looks timeless, despite its 50 plus years old. So I'll just put it on. You've heard it working already. Obviously I can't stay on anything music channel because I'll get a copyright strike. Find some talking.
Of course, I can say everything.
Okay. Because some people say, you know, there have been questions about,
There we go.
I'm not saying the fishermen have done it, but there have been questions about...
A very nice radio, and hopefully that will last for many years to come rather than ending up in landfill. So really pleased with how that's come out. It's not been a particularly taxing electronic job, and I didn't want that for my first go, but I've already got my next project in a box in the workshop, which we'll be tackling in a couple of weeks, which I'm sure will be quite a bit more involved than this one. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Thank you to the subscribers and the new subscribers who've come along, and we'll catch you all very soon on another video when we'll be making something else.